I think the biggest challenge was in the crisis of 08, 09, which is a large part about where we are now. I had the vision for the holding company all the way back in business school in the day. But in 09-ish, 08, when the market went to hooey, we had a company that could do 300, 400 million in overnight. We were about to start 3 big elderly projects across the country, each of them 50 to 100 million, and had staffed up for that, and it was gone overnight. And then suddenly you're looking at a $25 million backlog.
Welcome to Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that you do not have to lead alone. I'm Mark DeBron, and today we're joined by somebody who has breathed courage into me and so many other people here in St. Louis and beyond, Joe McKee. Joe is a friend. He's also the visionary owner of Paric, a construction industry leader. They've experienced exponential growth under his leadership. They're known throughout the industry for reliably actually delivering on time and on budget, such a rarity in that industry. Joe is the chapter chair of St. Louis YPO Gold. He's also poured into that community for decades and gained so much from it. And he's happily married to Brenda and a proud father of 4 growing adult children. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Just one minor clarification. I sit at Paric Holdings. So the Paric, in St. Louis, there's 8 or 9 other companies, depending on how you count them, that are in other markets and other places away from St. Louis. So there's a small group that runs the whole holdings thing.
Well, it's a great topic to dive into a little bit deeper, because the idea that you've experienced exponential growth, It started with a single operating entity and now has grown into a holding company. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a beautiful part. I think first of all, before we dive into any of those details, I want to ask you one question.
Okay.
I've asked every single leader I've had on the podcast. If you go back through your leadership journey, on the way to where you're at today, when did you learn that you didn't have to lead alone?
That's a tough question. I think the first thing is when I got married. That was the first time I learned that. I'm very blessed with Brenda, who is way smarter than me, way talented than me, and for the first 10 years of our first part of our life was more successful on the business side than I was until we had 3 kids in diapers and we made a decision. She's been my partner through this whole thing, and I didn't do anything without her being my wingman and my person. So when we bought the company, there's a list in the picture behind me of the pros and cons when we made that decision and executed a deal with my father about 30 days in a very short time frame. And I would tell you the pros were way better than we thought, and then we had them pretty well nailed, and the cons were way worse than we thought, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, and we did it together. And she's been my partner all the way through this. The other was when I was made primarily, in my learning style as such, I've always needed other people around me and how I think and how I work. So I was very much a delegator because I had to be. So I did a lot of that, but when it came to the true leadership and decisions, I didn't do a ton of that. I pretty much set my direction and wasn't really good about listening or learning. But I was lucky along the way to get some very good mentors. I think the first one would be Rick Jordan, the RIC in Paric. I never reported directly to my dad. So he had this really nice way of pointing things out, much less direct, but very, very detailed and very thoughtful, that usually can rein me in and say, hey, you can't forget about this, or you can't forget about these people, you can't forget about that, because I'm very focused and can run over people and do some of that. The second was I was named president in the meeting, and I knew I was one of the candidates. It came a little earlier, and I actually had to report to Rick. And it was like we had competition in the company. Half the room were friend of Joe's, half the room weren't. I really didn't decide who was that, because I tended to gravitate a certain type of person on my group. And now I'm leading the whole thing. You can imagine how that happens. So some people start leaving, and my CFO left. Within like 6 weeks of that announcement. And with my dad's help and Rick's help, we convinced Larry Young, who ran Angelica, to come on board. And fundamentally, he had led that company. He worked at Arthur Andersen, saw a ton of companies through the years. And he worked part-time as my CFO. And he has no filter. A couple just brief examples. I think I had to let some people go, and I came out of that meeting. It was multiple people. I came out 2 hours later, and he had colorful language. I'm going to try to leave that part out so you can use it in the podcast. He said, "What in the heck were you doing in all that time frame? Did anybody ever teach you how to fire anybody?" He said, "Heck no." So are you trying to make him feel better? I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good luck." You honestly think you can do that? So he that's when I started to realize that there was so much I didn't know that I needed to put really good people around me. And then as I've gotten older, and something I learned in the last 5 years about my learning style, I was forced to do that too. So my strengths are not an intellect. They rely in other places. So I need people to believe in where I'm going, and I can set a vision and a value and a direction and see things strategically in a different way. That's my strength, but I need executors around me. I need people that can challenge me. I need a leadership team that's not wallflowers, and we need to have. I love it when we have an argument, and at the end of the day, and it's that room's heated. And, you're not throwing things. It's got to be in a professional manner. But you walk out of there and you set a direction, but everybody's on board because it's a safe place. You can express your thoughts and have your doubts, and you don't get in that whole groupthink idea. So I guess that's a long answer to a very short question.
Well, there's so much depth there. First of all, I want to take you back because the first thing you shared was marriage was the first place you realized that you couldn't do it alone, and you were leading with somebody who complimented you and could take you places that you couldn't go by yourself. You've been married how long?
I got to get this right, since 1992, so you do the math. 32, 30, I think it's 33 this November, I think sounds right. But yeah, seems like yesterday. How about that?
Yeah, it seems like yesterday. It's infinitely long and so short. The idea that you have bound yourself to someone to partner with, to go through this life together, which requires humility and discipline and courage. It's just a lot. It requires a lot. And so I love that you brought us back there. I've been married now for almost 25 years. I spent an hour and a half this morning with my wife, just talking through things, where we're at and where we're headed. And it's an ongoing place where I learn that lesson over and over and over and over again. And so I love that you brought that in, because it's this hidden leadership development work, like we have to develop, or else it doesn't work. And so I just think it's such a beautiful place. And then you mentioned two people. I want to call them out. It was Rick and, tell me it was Larry.
Young. Larry Young.
So Rick and Larry, what I heard from you whenever you're sharing about Rick is that he was willing to call you out on the things that you needed to adjust while he celebrated the things that you were good at.
Yeah, very, very much so. And he allowed me the freedom to do my own thing. Yeah, at a young age, I got at Paric. I'd like to think it wasn't because I was the SOB or the son of the boss, but I got a lot more freedom. But I think I earned a lot of it because I was relatively successful. So I learned very early that I had to rely on the people that really knew how to build, that I could manage the process, that I could manage the customer, manage the sub-relationships, and let the builders go and take away their obstacles. If I did that, my projects were successful. And then when I got to, then I took some leaps along the way to go run an estimating group, and I had no idea what I was doing there. And I made some colossal mistakes, and Rick allowed me to make those. I mean, when you're starting to research what happens if a bid bond gets called and you're running an estimating group, that's not a good thing. Just saying. I might have lived through that experience. It wasn't fun. The moral of that story, it's tough to build in Kirksville, Missouri.
I want to talk about Rick's behaviors, because although people that are listening are going to be in different industries, they all, there was somebody he was actually above you in the org structure. Is that correct?
He's my dad's partner. He owned 30% of the company.
And so he was your leader, your manager, and he was willing to give you freedom to run, but he was also willing to correct you.
Oh, yeah.
And say, hey, this is the area you need to adjust. That's what I heard from you at your first.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you learn real quick. I mean, another guy that ended up being with me through those times when we transitioned as president, I worked under him as a project manager, and I screwed something up in a bid where I transposed some numbers. Back then we actually used 10 keys and paper, and actually So I put the numbers in wrong and it sold the number. And I mean, I didn't sleep for a week, and I finally rolled in the office and said, hey, and at that time it was a big, couple $1 million job, and I had a $60,000 problem. And he goes, well, go fix it. Didn't chew my butt. Didn't do anything. He just says, go figure it out. You're at the start of the job. Figure it out. Go. And by the end, I figured it out. But man, I spent a week worrying where if I just walked into the first day and he said, here's some ideas, but go. You're smart enough. Go figure it out.
So I'm just going to call out those leadership behaviors. So basically, you made a mistake. It was a $60,000 mistake. It was material. It was material enough for you to lose sleep over. You brought it to a leader and said, hey, listen, this is the mistake. He gave you some thoughts about what might solve it, but he gave you back the responsibility for fixing it. And he said, go fix it. He didn't judge you. He didn't say you're a bad person. He said, you need to address this issue that you created. But he allowed you and gave you responsibility for fixing it. What a powerful leadership lesson.
Well, and I think in today's world, because of technology and everything else, the freedom to do those things in our businesses, we don't have that freedom. And in many ways, people are afraid to make mistakes today. Because of all the ways you're watched and monitored and the detail you have now, is not always necessarily a good thing.
He made it safe for you to make a mistake. How have you modeled that in Paric? How have you made it safe for people to make mistakes? How do you talk about mistakes? What do you do today to help create a culture where people can learn from their mistakes, take ownership over them, and go forward and make them better?
Well, I think we've done it poorly in some ways, and in other ways we've done it very successfully.
Give me one of the examples that you've done well.
Well, I think poorly, we're a bunch of engineers. So whenever we have a problem, we tend to take that problem and create a process to solve it, whether we've had it 1,000 times or 10 times or one time. If it's one time and it's really big, it's amazing. And in general, we all have the S on our chest, and we tend to want to pop our shirts off. And if one of our young leaders has a problem, and I did this as a young person at times too, go solve it for them rather than do what happened to me.
What happened for you is he gave you responsibility for fixing it, correct?
Yeah,
and what you're saying sometimes can happen when you're doing it poorly is you'll go in and save them and solve it for them. Yeah. And so that, for me, it's a big one. It's in parenting. It's in every leadership role I've ever had.
It's in spades in parenting.
As soon as I try to solve the problem for the person, I steal the opportunity for them to learn and grow from them. I do it to cover my own anxiety and fear of being able to make the mistake go away, and it feeds my ego and all of the stuff that goes on.
You nailed it, and especially with your kids, the difference between my management style for my oldest and the youngest, who are 9 years apart, in trying to make everything work here, and then realizing that all I can do is coach and mentor is vastly different in how we interacted. It doesn't mean you don't have expectations and you don't have requirements to be in a family or as a parent from what you expect, but it's a difference between trying to say, hey, you should go do this versus asking questions.
So we covered Brenda, we covered Rick, we didn't cover Larry, which is actually a different style. So Larry was actually hired by you, is that correct?
Technically, yeah, but my dad had a lot to do with that at the time. Yeah, he just stepped down as chair of our board. I had breakfast with him this morning, so I think 25 some years we've been together almost.
But in the role of the CFO role, where he was saying, when he said to you, you just fired a bunch of people and you didn't do it, and you did it poorly, right?
He didn't say it quite that nicely, but yeah.
What role was he in at that point in time?
He was my CFO.
Okay, so here's the cool part of that. I just want everybody to hear this from the listening side, because the first part is somebody above you starting to feed in and speak into your life, and you actually took it. Brenda's a partner of yours, not above you or below you. She's a partner, and you're listening to her. And then the third piece, which is this beautiful piece that not everybody gets to, is they can actually listen to people that are on their team and take advice. He directly criticized you.
Oh, yeah.
About a method you used in your leadership.
Absolutely.
Did you learn from that?
Oh, multiple times. I mean, there's a lot he did for me. He had ran a business. I had run a business. So some of the basic blocking and tackling, and some of the people things, I'd grown up at Paric, so I was very much a product of the system. He had perspective I didn't have, and could ask the tough questions and navigate the tough waters and keep me out of trouble.
We've all heard that hiring people that are smarter than us and more capable than us is a good thing, but it's hard to do. It's actually challenging to do because it's scary to hire somebody that could actually challenge us and do better. They might do better in our role than we would, and so it's like, okay, wait, what happens here? And so he was able to do that for you. You invited him in with your dad, and you allowed him to speak into your leadership. You're sharing it on a podcast. So I'm just telling you that those are beautiful examples of how to not lead alone.
In the end, you are the lone because in many cases, the tougher things, you got to make those calls.
The responsibility ultimately lies with you as CEO if you're in that role, or owner if you're in that role. And I want to talk with you about YPO specifically. So in YPO, we're taught to rely on others in small groups like forums. Tell me about that experience and how that's helped you in your not leading alone idea.
Well, there's the three components of YPO, is the international and the network and the connection, which is amazing. From a Disney trip, I have a JV with Yates Construction that we met at the YPO Disney trip. And, 6 months later, we did our first casino job. We've probably done $500 million worth of casino work, and that JV's done almost $1 billion worth of work together, and we continue to chase work. I was just down there seeing William a week ago. That's the YPO connection. If you look at it from the chapter basis, and being in leadership, because I did lead Y, now I lead Goal. Being in Y leadership forced me to delegate and develop some things in the company, and got me to look at things differently, and got me out of the company and see some different experiences. It taught me a ton about leadership and helped build my network at a time I needed to, and really stretched me as a leader, and it forced me to let go of some things with my company. Some other people could step up, which is really kind of cool. Amazing experience, won awards, did all that, and then if you flip to the forum side, that's the heart. My initial it took me a while to get in, but once I got in, we started a forum that's still in existence today, DC2. Although we still age people out, so I've been aged out for a while. And that group helped me navigate so many difficult challenges. I can't talk about them all, but it was a safe place for me, the one place where I could go work on me, my family, and my business. And the biggest thing I think you take away from Forum is a couple of things. As guys, we don't typically have groups to support us, good times, bad, or indifferent, right? You hear, it's the old fist bump. It's not, there it's a little deeper relationship, which is very nice to have. And we were blessed to have, in my time in DC2, a couple women in there that was amazing too, which really made for a different experience. Anyway, long story short, there's that component of it. I think the other component of it is it's a place when you are in challenging times or good times that you might get asked some questions or get challenged, or you get to, and when things are going good, you believe your own bullshit, and that's when you're going to stumble. And when things are bad, they're usually not as bad as you think, and you can find a little nugget or a little idea that can catapult you or help you deal with some challenges. I know in my case, Forum helped me lose a ton of weight. I tend to eat my stress. I don't drink, so I'm a professional eater, and since that time, I've managed it a lot better than what I was then.
So I think about the things that you have shared. One is that they're there for you, open to hearing the real stuff. It creates the relationships that sometimes people in business leadership don't create naturally, whether they're male or female. Sometimes we struggle because we're at the top of the organization, and so we don't have people that are peers that we can bounce things off as easily, and so it's hard. And so this gave you peer-to-peer relationships that you could actually weather the storm with, and could test you when you're over succeeding. They can test, wait a minute, okay, let's look at it from a different perspective as well, and so they can actually help you see things more clearly.
For me, it's amazing that when you're the one helping and sharing from your experience, you don't know how you affected somebody else because you don't necessarily always get that feedback in Forum. But everybody keeps coming because they're getting that, which is the one or two things, that you jot down that you might go put in practice, or makes it okay to feel, makes something okay that you're struggling with. And I think the biggest thing in there is, as a leader, when you're sitting up top and you're making the calls we have to make, it can be a very lonely place. And to know you're not alone. is huge.
Yeah, not alone, that you're going through something and you're not alone, that other people are going through things.
Whether it's a family crisis, life crisis, business crisis, or opportunities, right? Assessing opportunities.
Yeah. If you think about, you're looking back over the last decades, a challenge that's come through in the business side, let's stay on the business side for a minute, that you were able to overcome and get through and grow from. Any challenges that come up that whenever I think about something that's grown you as a leader?
Multiple, too many to list. I think the biggest challenge was in the crisis of 08-09. Which is a large part about where we are now. I had the vision for the holding company all the way back in business school in the day. But in 09-ish, 08, when the market went to hooey, we had a company that could do 300, 400 million. And overnight, we were about to start 3 big elderly projects across the country, each of them 50 to 100 million, and had staffed up for that. And it was gone overnight. And then suddenly you're looking at a $25 million backlog. And we did the things you had to do there, which was unfortunately let some great people go. And we did it early, so most of them landed on their feet, but not, but we had a debate of really, should we go deeper? Because we could have gone deeper, and did some math, and I finally just said, guess what? We're just going to ride with these people, and we're either going to make it or we're not. And a couple key things happened in that mix. And you fast forward about, we're really not closing work, and it's really scary. And we're down to towards and that's right before Christmas, and then we didn't close anything, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a train wreck. It's going to be a train wreck. And I remember two things that just were amazing to me. One was the partner I mentioned at the first is sitting on the edge of the bed, and one night not sleeping and in a really bad way, and just, you got that recorder just going and going and going, and what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? And then this Brenda woke up, gave me a big hug, and he said, we had nothing when we started. I came from nothing. When you were younger, you didn't have much either. I think we'll figure this out together, and I'm okay if we live in a trailer park, I think was the quote, and I'll still love you. And that was like one, if I had 2 rocks in my bag, that rock went away. And then I at that point, and I've gotten out of this habit, I was daily mass. I'm pretty Catholic, and Monsignor Unger at St. John, and we got the gospel on about the Peter and the rock being the rock, and up for the church and all that. And he had this knack. He taught homilist for the Archdiocese for a long time. At 6:30 Mass, you're not going to get an hour homily. You're going to get like a 3-sentence homily. And he literally said, sometimes in life, you just got to cling to the rock, trust in God, and let go. Or something to that effect. And I just went, here you go, big guy. I can't do anymore. It is going to be what it's going to be. We'll play as hard as we can, and whatever happens, happens. It's not in my control, because I'm a control person. I'm an engineer. I like to... If you give me something, you see it in the YPO meetings, I'm very, I'm trying to tell you all what to do, and and you all are leading your own companies, and that's just my nature. I'm a little bit of a bull relative to that, and I'll be God darn it if, I own the Stiefel Theater. That came out of that. My brother and I guaranteed that, and got that almost $100 million, well, it was a $150 million deal going, and put a bunch of people to work in tough times, and guaranteed crap. We didn't have if they'd have called those guarantees, I'd have said, here are the keys, and had some a YPOer help up to close a gap on that, that's another YPO experience. And literally that project was done in 1932, so the two things kind of, and to this day I'm a partner with the Blues and had a great Stanley Cup experience from that. Got the first bond financed elderly housing project at Aberdeen Lights, $100 million closed in the country. That's just in Kirkwood. And then we bid and got with Steve Smith, the Union Pacific downtown, and converted that in a hard bid. And suddenly, a year later, we get the ENR, and I sent it was ENR is an Engineering News record, and it's focused on St. Louis. I sent it to my president at the time, Keith, and he sends it back to me. He says, you realize what our market share is? And he said, no. And I think it's somewhere it's at least 20. It could be as high as 40. I don't know how they get this data. And he looked at me with this funny look on his face. He says, "You think that's sustainable?" And I used contractor language and said, "No." So that began the strategic planning process that led to us buying our first company, which is Henning. Led to this. And in 08, 09, we tried multiple things. I bought a furniture company that didn't work. I started down the road of being a federal government working a minority contracting deal. Didn't feel like it aligned with our culture. About $500,000 later, we walked away from that. We actually had a job that we were going to get, and we said no. Because it wasn't our culture. It wasn't who we are. Working for the government's a whole different game. But one of the guys came to me with an idea that, hey, I think we can do this thing with rural electric co-ops. And we tried that, and that's a business today. That's a $200 million business-ish that works all over the country and is just very, very successful. So I was 1 for 3. Or 2 for 3, because the acquisition of Henning's gone really well, and that's in the agriculture space. And most people don't know what we do in those places, and that's just fine with me.
That's okay. You don't have to talk about it all over the place.
No. They're really niche markets, but that pressure, that angst, allowed those things to happen.
Yeah. You were under enormous pressure. The end of yourself pressure, 2008 hit many of our listeners. It hit me. Our core market went down 90%. And you really are testing your leadership at that point in time. What are you going to do, and how are you going to show up? And I
think we got something like that coming here shortly, is what I think. Fun.
What's so beautiful is that you've lived through enough of life to know that from great tragedy can come this incredible gift that you're seeing. And I just want to call out the 2 things that I heard in your share. One is you sat down with the partner that's a forever partner, and you said, "Hey, listen, where are we at here?" And she said, "It doesn't matter. We're together no matter what. Let's go. And we can go to trailer or not." My wife and I, 25 years, I reset budget by 75% with her on her okayness when we shifted to our own business. And that is the kind of woman she said, "Can we keep the house?" is the question. Like, is that, and I'm like, "Yeah, we got the house. That's no problem."
Yeah, I didn't take salary for a while. I didn't take bonus. All of us at leadership took pay cuts. We did all that stuff, right? And
so I think about not leading alone. You have decided to not lead alone. Mm-hmm. And then I think about the other piece, which, we don't get to talk about very often, but faith, the idea that I'm going to just stop this control freak. I call myself a recovering control freak because
You're better
every time, like literally, I want to reach across the screen and just control that other individual. And I'm like, stop doing that. And so you were able to give up control and say, listen, this is above me.
Yeah.
And I will serve here and I'll make the next step. But if you have to take it all away, it's okay.
Yeah.
And then it's just amazing what the growth has happened. So I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing it. Here's one last question. If you could go back, what was the date that the 30-day buy? So, you bought the business from your dad. Just that point in time. You remember that point in time?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could go back there and tell your younger self some advice. So you're now the coach, you're the mentor, you're the guide for yourself. What would you share with them? What advice would you give to that younger leader of yours?
My greatest motivator is also my greatest inability to move quick. And I admire some people, like my dad is pretty much a gunslinger. Some other people in this industry are gunslingers. Bob Clark. I'm a little bit of a plotter. Only recently have I started, and because of some things I saw, I tended to be a bit more risk averse. So I think I would say to myself is, I think I'd be where I'm at today probably 10 years earlier if I'd have played with a bit more reckless abandon and trusted my gut and my instinct. And the other thing is the engineer in me liked managing the numbers and focused on that. And the transition, gray hair and oldness teaches you, really that's the wrong focus, and it took me a while to learn that. And get it focused where I think we are today, which was our whole mission is to develop leaders and empower leaders and let them achieve their visions. And I'm a facilitator of that versus very much a command and control and all that good stuff, because that's not sustainable long term.
Yeah, well, I love both of those. I'm just going to share back what I heard. You would trust your gut and make bigger decisions earlier in your career, and you would have a deeper focus on people leadership development, and so that you would turn that energy, that passion of that bigger risk taking over to the people so that they could grow and learn from it. I really love that. If you are listening today and you'd like to have a conversation about purpose, profit, growth, community, YPO, any of those, I can be found at encouragingleaders.com. Set a 15-minute time. We'd love to meet you. And I just really appreciate you listening in today. And also, Joe, incredible to have you as a guest. Thank you so much for pouring out into the community.
No problem.